From dog tags to ownership, heroes take the lead. Stories of veterans building dreams with passion, drive, and speed. From service to success, we're here to inspire the quest. Dog tags to ownership, we're the best. Take the prize.
From the battlefield to the boardroom, this is DogTags to Ownership, the podcast where veterans share their journeys from serving our nation to leading in business. Hear inspiring stories of grit, growth, and the entrepreneurial spirit that drives those who've served to succeed. Tune in and take the first step towards your own mission in entrepreneurship.
Military One Percenters, welcome to DogTags Ownership, where once a week we interview veterans who charted a path towards entrepreneurship. Here, our goals are to share resources, advice, and success stories about starting a business, discuss strategies for building financial independence and creating your own path, and most importantly, build a community to support each other through the challenges of transitioning from service life to civilian ownership. We're extremely excited to introduce our guest to the show, Jerry Arteaga. Jerry is a 23-year U.S. Army Special Forces veteran who retired in 2021 and currently serves as the CEO of Valor Exterior Partners, a private equity-backed exterior home service company executing a buy and build strategy in the Northeast. Jerry, welcome to our podcast, and thank you so much for joining us today to discuss your journey from turning your dog tags into ownership. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Julie and Matt.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your military service?
I spent 23 years in the Army. I joined at about 17 and a half. I left for basic training 3 days after high school graduation, like probably many veterans did. Joined at the infantry was the first thing that they throw at me. So I took it. They said, you can go to Hawaii, and I was sold. So, by the time I got done with basic and showed up to my first duty station, I was, I don't know, 18 and some change. While I was there, within like the first year and a half, I would say, a friend of mine came up to me and was like, "Hey man, I'm gonna go to a selection. Do you want to come with me?" Naive kid from South Texas. I was like, what is that?" He said, "Oh, special forces, like Rambo." I said, "Rambo?" I said, "Sign me up." You know? So not knowing what I was getting into, about 2 or 3 months later, I showed up at Fort Bragg and I went through selection. I was fortunate enough to get selected. And in early 2001, I started my Special Forces qualification journey. I reported to the 7th Special Forces Group in May 2002. And I stayed in the same battalion for roughly 15 years. I was able to go on 23 different deployments, 6 to combat and 18 to South America and the Caribbean. And then I wrapped up my career as a legislative liaison on Capitol Hill and the Pentagon before, transitioning into the civilian world.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Great. That's a great military story. So you just retired in 2021. So when you were getting ready to transition out of the military, did you take advantage of any of like the VA or transition assistant programs as you were transitioning?
Once I decided that I reached a kind of a natural transition point, leaving one job on the way to another, I figured, hey, 23 years, I had a good run. I was 30, so I was 40 at the time, I think. Yeah, just turned 40. So I was like, oh, it's a good time to retire. I kind of leveraged my network and was able to get offered an internship at a private equity firm based out of Chicago. And so I did leverage the Army Skills Program that afforded me kind of a customized 4-month internship as I was exiting the military. But that's really the only resource that I used.
Could you talk about how your time spent in the military prepared you for what you're doing now or for that transition from military service to, corporate America?
Yeah, I would say that what the military afforded me was the repetitions in a leadership role, right? So I feel like when you join the military, you're almost outside of being like a private, you're given lower levels of responsibility and then leadership roles from squad leader to, team leader, squad leader, platoon sergeant and whatnot. And just getting all those repetitions, I think it was really the most value add from my military experience. I think people who come straight out of college and have a great academic education, but have never really been put in leadership roles until they kind of get to their first job. And then it's like, hey, you have this big fancy degree, now go lead people. So I think that my time spent in the military was definitely gave me a leg up as I moved into corporate America. It allowed me to kind of hone my ability to communicate across the socioeconomic spectrum. In the military, we deal with folks like myself who grew up in a trailer house, was born to two 16-year-old kids, really, all the way through college educated master's degree specialists, right? And so the ability to communicate across that spectrum of experience and backgrounds to gain stakeholder buy-in to kind of achieve the Army's mission was another kind of thing that I took from the military, because I have to do that in my day-to-day job now in corporate America. Really, at the end of the day, it's the same thing, right? In the military, we were responsible for people, processes, and resources. And our metric for success was combat readiness and lethality. Is my unit ready for combat? And when I get there, will we be lethal? In corporate America, it's the same thing, right? We're in charge of people, process, and resources, except the metric for success is now profitability, right? Is what I'm doing generating profits for the business? So, I guess the easy way to sum it up is the military showed me how to do it. And then my subsequent business school showed me how to translate it into corporate America. So veterans have this unique set of skills and, really resiliency is not really a skill, but skills and resiliency to get through difficult times. And, you give them a mission, their guidance, and they're going to meet it. And in general, like that's what we get out of the military. And that's definitely what I took from it as I transitioned out.
That's great. And then now you're an operating partner in private equity, is that correct? And also the CEO of Valor Exterior Partners. So can you talk about your role, responsibilities in that position now?
Yeah. So as soon as I exited the military, I started my internship at a lower middle market private equity firm based out of Chicago. And my role was an operating partner. So an operating partner, at least at the firm I was working for, we get assigned to the executive teams of their investment platforms. So think CEO, COO, CFO, and we represent the private equity firm's interest within that investment or platform. And so my particular role at the platforms that I worked on was specifically focused on pre-acquisition operational due diligence, post-acquisition integration, and then assisting the executive team with long-term value creation, planning, and execution. And so for me, my day-to-day was, hey, here's the investment we want to make. I went and kind of reviewed the operational components of it to make sure that it did meet our criteria. And then as I was doing that, I would create the plan on how we're going to integrate it onto our processes and systems. And then once the acquisition was closed, I executed that plan. And so I did that across three different industries. One of them was the compounding and specialty pharmacy group. The second was a residential landscaping group. And the third was a dental platform. And, those generally 4 years of experience kind of put me in a position to where I was able to kind of take advantage of an opportunity, which is the one I'm in now. It's a different private equity firm, Osceola Capital, based out of Tampa, Florida. Kurt Schwab, also a veteran, a Navy veteran, is the VP there, and I work with him closely to execute this strategy that we're doing, which is buying roofing companies along the eastern seaboard. So think Maine down to Virginia, cross through Ohio, and then down into Kentucky and Tennessee. So if you include Washington, D.C., we will be in all 17 of those states. It'll likely end up being around 20 locations, and that's through various growth mechanisms. So accretive acquisitions through merger and acquisition, and then also launching new sites through a de novo strategy.
So, so a lot of new information for myself here. And I do want to get into that. But I was thinking in my mind, you separated in 2021, and I mean, shortly thereafter, you're in private equity. I know you went to school. How much did the degrees prepare you, I guess, for your transition to professional executive work, I guess? Like that seems
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
huge
So
jump from the military into private equity, I guess.
yeah, and so one thing I want to this is a great kind of intro to is, so when I was on a team, it was all about what school are you going to, right? Halo School, Sniper School, Sephardic, Cephalic. I mean, all these cool guy schools. And once I was very, very fortunate in that it's probably easier for me to list the schools that I didn't go to than all the ones that I did. And so for me, when I got promoted to E8, I was then responsible for a team. I'll never forget when my company sergeant major at the time said, "Hey Jerry, your school days are over. Like now you're in charge of the team, so no more schools." And I said, "Interesting. Okay." And so I went back to my team room, thought about how I could show him, like, I'm not done with schools. So that's when I enrolled into my first college class. And I was very fortunate in the Army. So I was able to get a undergraduate degree from Norwich University, had a great online program. And then I was selected to go to the National Defense University for a master's degree. So I was a full-time active duty employee, and my whole job was to go to school for a year. So it was an in-person master's degree. While I was there, I applied for that legislative liaison position. I was selected. They take 2 NCOs a year. I was just so happened to be one of them that year. And part of that program was to get another master's degree from George Washington University in legislative affairs. So I had to be a lobbyist pretty much. Again, I spent another year as a full-time student before I, took the role in on Capitol Hill. And then shortly after that, I started a doctoral program in educational leadership with a focus on change management. And I was in the middle of writing my dissertation, kind of when I made that decision to retire. And again, I was afforded this opportunity through my network. Another great veteran, Gregory Pavinsky. He was a team leader of mine way back when. And anyway, he kind of introduced me to this company. They offered me the role. And the more I looked into what private equity was, I knew that the duties and responsibilities were up my alley, but I didn't have full confidence in like my business acumen because it is a big jump, right? And so the more research I did into it, I had about 6 months before I had to start my internship. I kept thinking, man, like, do I need an MBA? I'm in the middle of my dissertation. Like I've already been in school for, 2.5 years doing this. And do I need an MBA? Well, at the end of the day, I ended up putting the dissertation down. I applied for Kellogg, School of Business at Northwestern, and retired, started my new job at the private equity firm and my MBA all in the same day. And so, you know, in a way it's tough. Like it's a lot of work all at once, right? You're dealing with the changes in your life as you transition out of something that I knew for 23 years, right? Something totally different. The added schoolwork, luckily I was already a full-time student for, the 8 years prior to that. So that really didn't deter me much. But it was really the, kind of the new role that's super challenging and intimidating. You definitely have imposter syndrome when you're sitting in the room with these folks, but you know, little do we know that we're actually like way above where we think we are. So just based on our experience, anybody can learn how to read a P&L. It's very difficult to teach somebody the leadership experience that veterans have in a short amount of time. So, that's why when I talk to employers who are considering, veterans for some of these executive roles, my key piece of advice to them is hire for trait, train the skill. Find that person is trustworthy, that is fire and forget, that is going to break down walls to get the job done, and then teach him the nuanced skill that he's going to need to run that line of business. That's going to be faster to do than it is going to be to teach them all the other things that kind of we get in the military.
Yeah. So this is I think you said your third or your fourth private equity firm that you're working with?
Yeah, no. So I worked with one private equity
Okay.
firm across 3 different platforms.
Okay.
And so this is the second private equity firm that I'm with now. They've got 10 platforms. They've made over 130 acquisitions since 2018. They're investing out of their second institutional fund, also founded by an Air Force veteran, Lieutenant Colonel. So a lot of veterans in this space.
Yeah, and so what, I guess, continues to draw you to private equity and continuing to stay in that realm of your business right now? You said you started with one across 3 platforms, and then you moved over to this private equity firm. What keeps you going back to private equity and continuing on in that space?
I think it's the high op tempo, outside of doing God's work in the Middle East. This is my favorite job. I mean, working in this industry, I mean, it's just, you're sitting across the table from, people who've owned their business for 20 or 30 years, trying to, convince them that you're going to make a good partner to sell it to you. And then after the deal is done, it's how do you make it work, right? How do you get it to integrate as one company? So like I said, the goal for Valor Exterior Partners is 20 locations, right? I need one company with 20 locations, not 20 locations in 20 different companies, right? And so the challenge is in the execution of the integration. That's where veterans excel at, in my opinion, is execution. My VP of operations and integration, also a Marine veteran, Gunny, and he's crushing it out there. We've made 5 acquisitions since last August. If you know anything about private equity, 5 acquisitions in 9 months is extremely heavy lift, especially considering it's like 3 of us. I started off with the first 2 acquisitions all by myself, obviously with the support of Osceola Capital, specifically, Kurt Schwab and his team. And then as we were going towards the third acquisition is when I brought somebody else on. But it's just I call it a new problem every day, but it's just a new challenge every day, right? Like, how do you make this work? And so all of the same skills that we honed in the military, again, communication, building stakeholder buy-in, but planning, identifying and mitigating risks, managing the execution of the plan. Like, I undertake the exact same MDMP process pretty much as I did in the military when planning an HVT op as I do making a budget for one of my sites, right? It's like, what can go wrong? How do we get ahead of it? The only thing is that it's not somebody's life that's on the line. If we make a mistake, we can always recast the budget. Can't bring somebody back, but I still take it, with the same amount of planning, consideration, and thoughtfulness.
Where do you see you all going in the future and the next steps of growing the company now that you've hit all those states? Are you guys continuing to find other companies to buy through the private equity within those states? And then are you looking to expand further across the United States?
Yeah, so right now I'm in 5 of those states. I'll be in a sixth with my next acquisition next month. And like I said, I'm focused on these 17 states first, and then we're likely spread west. The South isn't necessarily our market due to the high storm activity and just doesn't align with our business plan.
Yeah.
But I think it'll take me about 4 years to get into all 17 of those states if we can keep up the pace that we're at now.
And then you mentioned your business plan. So did you come up with your business plan and what that looks like and how you're looking for growth and scale, or is that given to you from the higher company?
Yeah, so generally how it works is the private equity firm comes up with the investment thesis. So they identify the industry, they identify the segment of the industry, they identify, the regional areas if it's not nationwide. That process can take anywhere between 6, 9 months, and it goes through all of their processes of like approval and whatnot. They allocate funds to it. And so Osceola Capital, Kurt Schwab and that team, the investment thesis, when it was presented to me, it was, hey, you want to build out the operational plan to execute this thesis and then lead the team, to build the asset that we're looking for that will eventually exit. So the decision to invest in the space comes from the private equity firm. How we get to how we create and build that asset that we're going to exit, me and my team come up with that. And so I did that over the first few months before we made our initial acquisition, because again, I've done it across a few other industries. So I just had to modify the playbook that I've created over the last few years, make it so that it accommodates the roofing space, and we're ready to roll.
Yeah, so these are, if I could oversimplify, we'll say mom and pop roofing companies, maybe larger than that, under their own, private name. You acquire, it goes under more of an umbrella company or a larger corporation. And then do you hand that over to someone else after the acquisition process that puts in, I guess, the additional systems and processes that makes one company look like the other, look like the other? Is that done? Or do you retain all of that at your level?
Yeah, so I'll tell you the general kind of life cycle, but I want to address the last comment first. So me and my team are the ones that integrate them into one company.
Okay.
That's how we create value, right? So these mom and pop, if you will, roofing companies, they're basically owner founded and operated companies. 9 out of 10 times it was a guy that started with a truck and a trailer, and over the last 10, 15, 20 years he grew it to a $5 to $10 million revenue company. And for the most part, he's been running it as a lifestyle business, right? So his goal is to make his $1 million a year. And, he's already bought all the watches and the cars and taken the trips, and, he's good. But when we get now he wants to retire. So take his chips off the table. That's when we can step in to kind of take that over for him. And as I'm doing my diligence, I identify like, wow, like this is a great company. He's making 5 million in revenue, but based off of what I know that our systems processes can do to expand their capacity and kind of what the total addressable market is and how much, his share of it is, I look at it and say, well, he could be a $7 or $8 million company here in the next 2 or 3 years. So it's a great investment for us. Right. And so after we partner with them, they sometimes retain equity in the company. We acquire the controlling interest. I fold them into our processes, streamlining their operations 9 out of 10 times, increasing their capacity, and then we're able to grow their top line while optimizing their back office at Valor, reducing operational costs, and then ultimately increasing profitability. Once we build the asset, we'll look to build a true middle market asset. So think something north of 150, $200 million in revenue. Then we'll take that to market, and then a larger one of two, usually a larger private equity firm or investor will acquire and then either run it and kind of let it print money, or they'll say, hey, Jerry, here's a new checkbook, go out and go buy more companies. And then we just keep doing it, right? Or a strategic partner will purchase us, so a larger roofing company, and just fold us into their processes.
How you guys got started and doing this, and that you now have 3 people on your team. What is just like the overall organizational structure of Valor Exterior Partners and how you go out and acquire this? Is it the 3 of you, going out finding these companies, or do you have other folks that are also working for you part-time to help?
Yeah, no. So right now, and Valor's in its nascent stages. We're not even a year old. So again, we work with Osceola Capital, Kurt Schwab and his team. They handle all of the kind of M&A function, the merger and acquisition function. So we work with, buy side brokers, or we find potential partners through our networks within roofing. And so they handle that deal side piece, and then me and my team handle all the operations. As we mature and get further down the road, we'll bring in that A/business development function in-house. Right now, it's myself, my VP of Ops and Integration. I have a controller, and then we have some nearshore folks. So at my last private equity firm, I established a nearshore operations center in Guadalajara, Mexico. And they provided like call center support, some AP, AR function, IT support, because we get highly qualified people over there that are just fantastic assets. And so I have 3 folks in a nearshore operations center there now. I think that as Valor continues to grow, regardless of what revenue gets to, we likely won't be any more than 10 people, 8 to 10 people at the corporate level. And then I'll grow the nearshore support side out just a little bit more, probably 5 or 6 people total. But we should be able to manage 200 plus million in revenue with about that many people, no problem. As long as all our systems and processes are in place and being adhered to, it'll work every time.
Yeah, so what are some of your biggest challenges that you have right now in what you're doing and with your small team and being able to expand and get into more of those states?
Yeah, are always integration, right? I mean, you got to think this person that we've partnered with has run their company for 40 years, and so in their mind, it's the best company in the United States. It could never operate any better than it currently does today. So anything you're going to tell me is not going to work at my site. It may work at all your other ones, it's not going to work at ours, right? So just kind of building that stakeholder buy-in and getting them to buy in on the vision of, hey, here's what we're trying to build. Here's how it's going to work. Here's why it works. Here's how it's working elsewhere. And just kind of slow rolling it. Unlike the military, they don't have to do what you tell them to do, right? Like what's great in the military, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I could technically put you in jail. In the civilian world, it's definitely not that. So if you want to create lasting change, you got to get stakeholder buy-in so that they can implement it. I mean, if you go the autocratic method and say, hey, you will do this, they'll do it when you're looking, and eventually it'll fail. So for me, it's always it's never unilateral. It's always get some input. How do we get to, alignment so that we can, execute the goal that we've already agreed to at the acquisition, really?
Yeah, and do you have a lot of competition, like where you're currently trying to acquire more acquisitions, and how does that kind of influence what you're doing in the space that you're in?
Yeah, so the roofing industry is in its nascent stages of investment from private equity. So there's not a lot of competition, but there's enough. I don't really focus a lot on my competition because I find that if you're constantly looking at the other guy, you're missing out on what you should be doing. It kind of stifles also innovation. If you're trying to copy them, then you don't really ever come up with anything new yourself. And at the end of the day, our team is focused on execution. That is where most private equity firms fail. They come in with a great investment thesis. They come in with ample capital to make the investments, and then they buy and hold and don't really add value to the platform. I call that stacking EBITDA, right? They're just buying companies to say, I have a, $200 million company. No, you have 20 companies that are worth $200 million. We're doing the opposite. So, competition is always going to be there. I always tell people that I don't try to sell my product by disparaging the competition. I just educate, say, hey, here's what we can offer you. I think you're a good partner. If you think I'm a good partner, then we should do it. If not, I wish you the best of luck. And there's so much opportunity in the roofing space right now that there's plenty of meat on the bone, if you will.
Yeah, and I would assume with roofing in particular and people who started roofing businesses probably 20, 30, 40 years ago, what you had said is, they're looking at retirement now, boomers trying to get out of that business, sell it. So I could understand there's probably a good amount of folks for you guys to be able to go and acquire those and be able to buy those businesses from them.
It's not necessarily just folks looking to retire, right? So there's two general archetypes of a seller. One is the guy who wants to retire and, take some chips off the table and, go live his retirement life. But the other one is a guy that's built a good business and just doesn't know how to grow it, or maybe doesn't have the capital to grow it. And so, especially in the roofing space, you have roofers who happen to own a business and you have businessmen who happen to own a roofing company, right? Unfortunately, the majority of them are roofers who happen to own a business. So they kind of get, what I've seen, they get to that 3 or 5 million in revenue mark and they flatline. And it's just because it's tough to get past that. But once you can break that barrier and get the right processes and mindsets in place, 10 million is usually the next kind of plateau. That's a different, process. But yeah, so the two different archetypes. Yeah.
When you were talking about, getting stakeholder buy-in, how open are you about your military past, your experience and being in special forces? Is that something that you think provides a level of credibility and trust as you're working with these business owners?
Yeah, I like to think it does. I don't really focus on that outside of like my initial introduction of like, hey, I have a unique background, blah, blah, blah. I really don't focus on that. I think a lot of guys, because it's been our identity for so long that when you get out, like you're no longer Sergeant Major Arteaga, you're Jerry Arteaga, who happened to be a sergeant major in the Army. And I find that a lot of guys that can't drop that mindset struggle when they transition because they've lost their identity. You used to walking into a room and people standing up, and when you get out, that doesn't happen, and it ends one day to the next, right? Like one day you had your uniform on, the next day you don't. And so I really don't harp on it. Some guys that had family members in it, they'll talk to me about it, but I've never heard anything bad about me being in the military. And I've had quite a few conversations with people saying, hey, I lean towards you guys because of your military background. And I know that, so it has helped.
And then I think I read on your bio about membership in Owners in Honor, a 5C. Can you talk about that organization?
Yeah. So Owners in Honor is a fantastic nonprofit. It was started by Patrick Flood, former Lieutenant Colonel, also from 7 Special Forces Group. Amazing human being. He identified a gap in the veteran kind of services area where a lot of organizations are looking to get veterans into a job, you know another 9 to 5 making a paycheck. Patrick saw like, hey, like, why aren't these guys business owners, right? Like, create jobs. So Owners and Honors is a nonprofit that helps veterans achieve entrepreneurship through acquisition, so buying businesses. Basically, he's like a mini nonprofit PE firm, that he helps match sellers with potential vet or buyers that are veterans. Owners in Honor educates the veteran on kind of the ETA process, walks them through the SBA application and program, links them, their board of advisors is very robust. So links them up with the right resources. So he's got he's got accountants, he's got lawyers, he's got brokers, and, it's all free of charge to the veteran. It's roughly a 1-year program. If a veteran goes from, hey, I want to buy a business to buying one, a lot of them that are coming through already know they want to buy a business. They already have, an MBA or whatnot. They're somewhere along the process. So they're being able to do it a lot faster. But yeah, it's roughly, $10,000-$12,000 to get a veteran from start to finish is what it costs Patrick and his team to do. And so I sit on the board there. Patrick, about this time last year, actually called me up, was like, hey man, I saw you're at this private equity firm. Here's what I'm trying to do. And, we kind of walked through his process, made some changes, and it's just been growing really, really fast. A lot of support, sat on several panels, fireside chats with them, trying to get the word out. But yeah, this isn't creating jobs for veterans. It's, getting veterans to be business owners.
That's awesome, and that's definitely, part of our podcast is to help veterans, build that community who wanna pursue entrepreneurship, business ownership, either, whether transitioning out of the military or already out of the military. We'll link it to our website as well, for people to see that and be able to go and visit and see what it's all about. What is one thing, as people are kinda getting to those last years in the military and looking at transition and considering entrepreneurship, what's some advice that you would give them, as they're looking towards that end, I guess, in their military career?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually super unpopular. I tell veterans, especially kind of senior enlisted and, lieutenant colonel rank, like, hey, outside of thank you for your service, when you retire, nobody cares who you thought you were when you were in the military, right? If you go into the room thinking I was this, so I should be this, you've already failed. Like, it's just an upward battle from there. In corporate America, trust is earned, it's not given, right? In the military, when you come into a brand new unit as an E8, immediate trust, immediate responsibility, immediate authority, no questions asked, right? In the civilian world, in corporate America, just because your title, you got hired as a VP of whatever, people don't trust you until you've produced. So kind of getting into that mindset early really helps. Networking outside of your military network, going on LinkedIn is great, but if everyone that you've networked with is also a service member looking for a job, it's not really helpful. So identifying the industry you want to be in, following those people, asking for informal kind of interviews. You don't want your first email to be an ask unless you're asking for advice, and then decide what you want to do as early as you can. I'm even, me being a veteran, I always try to hire veterans. If you tell me I'll go anywhere and do anything, that's not the answer that somebody wants to hear, because that means you don't know what you want to do. And so if I invest the time and the resources into getting you where I need you to be to do what I need you to do, and then in 6 months you decide that's not what you want to do, it's just been a huge waste of time for everyone. So just be upfront. This is what I want to do. This is where I'd like to do it at, and find it. And then take advantage of internships. At least when I was coming through the ranks, it was like, oh, when I retire, there's going to be six-figure jobs waiting on me. No, they're not. They're not. So take advantage of internships. You will likely have to work in a role that's kind of beneath what your last authority and responsibility was. But if you're as good as you think you are, you'll blow right past where you were quickly, and get to where you want to be. I guess that's what the
Yeah,
advice I'd give.
no, I think, a lot of the things that you said we've heard many times on our podcast from other veterans is, one, finding the passion, knowing that you're not the most important person in the room when you walk in, and that you have to earn that trust and that respect when you get there in what you're doing. One thing as you were talking that made me think, so our podcast kind of has a double meaning a little bit. We say dog tags to ownership and pursuing ownership of a business, ownership of being an entrepreneur, but then also ownership of your life after the military. So how do you feel? Do you feel that you have more ownership of your life now that you've retired from the military and are doing private equity and running Valor Exterior Partners?
Yeah, so people when I first retired would say, "Hey, what was the hardest part about like retiring, transitioning?" And I said, getting up in the morning and deciding what I'm supposed to do next, right? With the entire time you're in the military, to a certain degree, somebody tells you what to do, where to be, what to wear, right? The day after you retire, there's nobody telling you that, unless you have a significant other, and then they're probably telling you that. But so it's tough transition. Do I feel like I have ownership? No. I mean, I have the guilt of like I should be working on my budget, or I should be working on this. It is nice to be able to go out of town without having to ask for permission. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I do have more ownership of my life. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any complaints about it. It's definitely better than it was when we were in the military,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, and then, I guess, is there anything else before we get to our last 2 questions that you wanna share with our listeners that we didn't ask about today, or a point that you wanna make, to our listeners and our followers?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think because the target audience is veterans. Look, no one owes you an opportunity. Be humble, sell yourself, and just know that every day you have to earn your job. whether you have it or, if you have it or you don't, you have to earn it. Special Forces motto is, quiet professionals, right? So it's very difficult to sell yourself when for 20 years I was told you're the quiet professional, right? But again, that goes back to that assumed respect and authority. When you walk into a room, they see all your scare me badges and they're like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. That people don't know that in the civilian world. So you got to sell yourself, and veterans are like the worst at doing it. And then in selling yourself, understand how your experiences and talents translates into the business world. Like, oh, I want to be a project manager. What does that mean, right? Just be prepared to talk about that. And also for the guys that are retiring, look, you're in a unique situation. You have a pension coming in. You can take a little more risk, and so take advantage of it. Take those internships that may not pay you anything or not what you want it to pay you, to have the opportunity to earn that job that you actually want. So those are kind of two pieces.
Well, a couple of the things you said, we had Joe Byerly on who created From the Green Notebook. I don't know if you've heard or read any of his stuff, but the routine was something he brought up. The difficulty in like finding that routine, and like he had things he did, but he still didn't feel like he really had like a true schedule and a true routine. And the other thing was, don't rush into that first thing. Like, don't be desperate. Like you said, if you've got that a bit of that safety net to fall back on, be a little bit picky. Be humble, but do what you want to do and not something that you feel like you have to do. So those were a couple of the things that really resonated when we talked to him. So I know we're going to get into our last two questions. My passion on the side of the military is real estate. So I listen to a lot of the real estate focused podcasts, read those types of books, and listen to those kinds of audiobooks. Is there anything you would recommend to our listeners, that are transitioning, or just something that you enjoy and you've found, to kind of develop yourself after the military?
Yeah, I mean, so two books is what I would recommend. One of them is like super short, but it's I think very impactful. It's called The Question Behind the Question by John Miller. It's primarily focused on kind of a personal accountability. The author talks about, how do you focus on asking yourself the right questions to solve the problem versus placing the blame on someone else. Like, the kind of it's not my job, or that guy didn't do his job, therefore I can't do mine. I've read that book. It's like 80 pages. Like, you could read it in an hour, 30 minutes. I've probably read it like 20 times. I mean, it's just a great book. Gives you some real simple advice. And then one that helped me kind of articulate my military experiences into the business world was going to be, I want to say cliche, but you hear it all the time, but it's really a good book. Good to Great by James Collins. I mean, he's focused on kind of building great companies through disciplined processes. And that's what we do in the military. We're disciplined and we run on processes. So kind of hearing the concepts, reading the concepts in his book, I was able to take what we did in the military, how he explained it in the book, and then craft kind of my personal brand pitch when I talk to folks. So it's those two books is what I would recommend.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely have to check those out. So our last question, final question of our every episode. Admiral William McRaven authored the book Make Your Bed: Little Things That Can Change the World and Maybe Your Life. So Jerry, do you make your bed every morning still when you get up?
Every morning without fail, and I was doing that before the book.
Yeah, part of your special forces training, right? Being like Rambo, you had to make the bed.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Jerry, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. I know we didn't ask all of the questions on the private equity side and how you operationalize the companies that you bring on board, but it's been a pleasure getting a little bit of a look behind the scenes on what you do and what you've created. And I couldn't help but think, like, as you were talking today, you said 17 and a half years old when you joined the Army. And I'm like, there wasn't really a time where you took a knee from, 17 and a half to where you are today. And and I just have to like say I'm incredibly impressed at what you've accomplished. And I'm sure the folks that work for you know the kind of person, you are, and the dedication that you have to be 17 and a half and never take a break. When you got out and going right into private equity is just really impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't believe they paid me to be in the Army. I can't believe they're paying me to do what I do now. I love it.
Yeah, and so just one final thing, if one of our listeners or followers want to reach out to you, What's the best way that they could get in contact with you if they had any questions, and would you be okay with them doing that?
Yeah, I'd say LinkedIn.
Okay.
I respond to my LinkedIn. I try to take every meeting that a veteran asks for, even if it's just 15 minutes. But yeah, LinkedIn's the best way. I'm constantly posting other content and articles and whatnot. So
Okay.
yeah.
Military one percenters, whether you're brainstorming your first business idea, already running a company, or just curious about where to start, DogTags Ownership is the place for you. Please hit that subscribe button to receive all new episodes. Also, if you know someone who has turned their dog tags into ownership, drop us a DM on social media or tag someone. We are always looking for new guests to bring onto the podcast. And as always, military one percenters, thank you for your service. Let's continue this journey and working together to write our next chapter. Until next week, keep pushing to turn those dog tags into ownership.
From dog tags to ownership, heroes take the lead. Stories of veterans building trains with passion, drive, and speed. From service to success, we're here to inspire the quest. Dog tags to ownership, we're the best. Take the prize.